this so that if any of you want to access this again, you'll be able to do that through our YouTube channel. And that said, I think we're just about ready to go. What we are going to start with today, we're going to actually give a poll. We're going to give a poll, and we're going to ask all of you to let us know what you'd like to cover in the workshop today. So with us today, we have one of our favorite speakers, and he's helped with the rec since before the rec was even a thing. And his name is Shaun Spalding with New Media Rights. And Shaun, tell us a little bit about yourself and about what you do there at New Media Rights.
Okay, can I share my screen?
Please do, it's all you.
Okay, so the poll should be going up. Just to let you understand what this poll is all about. So one of the best parts about having someone actually come in and talk is the fact that you get to talk about the thing you want to talk about instead of watching a video where it's just information that gets shot at you that you didn't have a choice of. So you should pick your top 3 topics that you'd like to cover today. Yes. And I will cover those topics. So please vote, because if you don't, you can't complain if this is boring and not useful to you. And so hopefully I'll do the top 3.
It looks like there's some good new topics in here too.
Oh, okay. All right. So people are already kind of choosing some new ones. Mm-hmm. I feel like the last few times I've done this, there's been two ones that come up all the time, and then one of them is kind of transient. So feel free to.
Right. Yeah. So it looks like people are mixing it up a little bit this time.
Yeah. And also the second thing is that another one of the nice things about this not being just a random recording is that I can hopefully see some of your smiling faces. I know not everyone is in a position where they can turn on their video or whatever, but assuming you're out there and you're excited.
So Shaun, I actually told them to turn their cameras off before, because I was thinking, oh, we'll keep the bandwidth down. Would you like them to have their cameras on for a minute?
Yeah, cameras on if you would like. Again, if you're having a bad hair day or something.
I just turned my camera on.
Awesome. I don't know who said that, but we can start to see some people coming in here.
I turned my camera on, but it's not coming on.
Uh-oh.
I don't see me.
I don't see anything either. But I feel you in spirit, regardless.
There we go. That works.
I think my camera. Are you viewing Shaun Spalding view options? Let me see. If I stop video, start video.
Is Shaun talking?
Oh no, this is SEAN.
Shaun Calouette.
Yeah, we can see your camera then when you came on, so we could see you.
Okay, I can't see me.
Well, rest assured, we know you're there.
I feel the energy.
Right. All right. The survey's ready to end the poll now.
Last chance to vote.
Right, last chance to vote. We have almost everybody voted.
Your civic duty.
Wait, I thought this just started.
It is just starting. It's just starting.
Okay.
Yep. So there's a poll coming up. If you guys can go ahead and answer the questions of the poll. And I'm going to go ahead, Shaun, and end the poll now.
Sounds good to me. All right. So as we are tabulating the results, I'll explain who I am. Oh, it just disappeared. I saw the results and then I didn't. All right. So the winner is business formation, with 56% of you talking about that. So that's always a favorite. Contracts with outsiders, third parties, so like developers, designers, and people like that. Another clear favorite, always a clear favorite, so that's 44%. And wow, it was neck and neck, but with 3% more, people chose what good lawyers do and how to choose one. New topic, very exciting. Never done that one before. But let's try it out. All right, who am I? Assistant Director, New Media Rights. We are a nonprofit we work with a lot of creatives and entrepreneurs and such. And so what we do for them is we do a lot of intellectual property law. We do a lot of privacy compliance. I'm trying to pull up our website. And the two things that you really just need to know about us, for the most part, are that we do a lot of free, pro bono, and extremely low cost services for people who are doing creative projects, innovative projects, can't afford $300, $500, $600 an hour for an attorney. And so we're connected with the law school, and one of the ways that we reduce our costs so we can help people out is that we also teach law students. And so we have a newsletter. If you go to newmediarights.org, you can sign up for that. That will allow you to keep up to date with what we're doing. And assuming that you have a issue that you wanted to reach out to us about, you could go to our contact form. So it's this contact us button. It's legal services request. And this form explains a little bit more about who we are, what we do, and how to reach out to us. So that's New Media Rights. And we don't have much time. So one more thing. Oh, we also have a book. It's very easy to read. Oftentimes people use this book as in teaching. So there's quite a few schools in their business and sort of first year legal classes. They'll use this book, and so it talks about business formation, contracts. It's only like $13, $12 on Amazon. So feel free, if you enjoy this, to take it home and learn a little bit more from that. All right, so as I said, this is a choose your own adventure. These are all the topics that you decided that you wanted to go through. And business formation is typically the one that people are really excited about, because you all are starting the kind of adventure towards entrepreneurship. And one of the first things that you might encounter in terms of legal issues is someone saying, oh, you should form your business. But naturally, at the same point, you might ask, well, that sounds great. How much does that cost? And someone might say, well, it costs $800 worth of filing fees, and then it costs $500 per year maintenance costs, and then it costs potentially $3,000 for an attorney to register. And so you wonder, well, is this worth it, right? I haven't actually made $1. And so how do I figure out whether or not I should form my business now or later, or how do I weigh this option when I don't have enough information? So let's talk about that. Before I talk about that, though, let's get some of the kind of rules out of the way. So why do people have business entities? So some of the formalized business entities are LLCs and corporations. Some of the informal ones are sole proprietors and general partnerships. Anyone who is doing any business in California for profit is automatically a sole proprietor. You don't have to do anything. You just become a sole proprietor. You probably already are a sole proprietor. Congratulations. All the rules of sole proprietorship now cover what you do. If you are working with more than one person in this motivation to sell something for a profit, you are now part of a general partnership. Again, you didn't need to file anything to do so, but you're part of a general partnership. All those rules apply to you. And so, what is exciting about paying all this money? What do you get for being a corporation? What do you get for being an LLC? Well, if you are one of these formal forms, you have several benefits. You limit your personal legal liability, meaning that if you get sued, for example, your business is the thing that gets sued, but not you personally. So what that means in practice is if your business has $100 in the bank and you as a person have $50,000 in the bank between the car that you own and the money in your bank account, you may even own property, right? Someone can sue you if your business does something wrong. Someone can sue you only for the $100 in your business's bank account. Someone cannot sue you for your personal money if you have a formal entity like a corporation or LLC. That is not true if you are a sole proprietor or a general partnership. There are other advantages. So there are some tax advantages. And so in some ways, you could save some money if you bring in a lot of revenue and you decide to be taxed as a corporation. It's beyond the scope of what we're talking about here to talk about those tax benefits, but there are some. LLCs and corporations provide a mark of professionalism. Everyone wants to call themselves a CEO, but you're only a CEO if you are the head of a formally organized corporation, right? So that is something that is helpful. For example, if you're going out and trying to raise money, oftentimes if you're past the stage of getting money from friends and family, most sort of savvy investors would not necessarily want to invest money into a sole proprietorship or a general partnership. And one of the reasons why, of course, is that the money is going to you personally, right? When you're not an organization. Whereas if you're an LLC or corporation, it goes to the company's bank account. There's some accountability there, and as a result, investors are likely to want to invest. Right? All right. So, what's the benefits of being informal? Costs little or no money to start or maintain. No money, right? If you're sole proprietorship, you probably already are. No formalities and few administrative requirements, right? Because if you have a limited amount of time to work on your business, you don't want to work on something that is a cost center / profit drain, right? You don't want to do something that just costs money. You want to do the things that potentially bring in revenue so you can actually get the business off right. All right, so how do I figure out if this is worth it? So I gave you some of the pros and some of the cons, and rather than so we are nonprofit lawyers. A lot of the people who work with us often engage in self-help because they can't necessarily afford lawyers and we can't work with everyone. And so if you go to a business formation lawyer and you ask, should I have a business, right? Should I form a corporation or an LLC? They'll automatically say, of course you should, right? Because they get paid when you pay them to form an LLC, right? But there's always going to be this question about how to balance the benefits that you get, so these pros, with the cons. And so let me walk you through how I would say if I were sort of looking at I can't give anyone specific advice as to whether or not they should form one right now, but I can tell you how to think about it. And so we have a triangle here that has 3 different factors that you bring away. And so you might start with saying, how valuable are your personal assets? Because if you have $1 in your bank account, then being sued for that dollar personally doesn't really affect you very much. But if you have $100,000 in your bank account, right, suddenly it starts making more sense to spend the $800 to $3,000 it might cost to protect that $100,000, right? It might look more like a drop in the bucket when you sort of think about how valuable your current assets are from how much it actually costs to form this corporation. All right, number 2, the probability that things can go wrong. And so one of the things I'm going to say over and over in this lecture is it doesn't take an attorney to do a lot of the types of things that startup attorneys do, which is determine what could go wrong and try to attempt to fix those problems, or at least anticipate them before they happen. And so this is a good example of a place where you can go ahead and figure out what could go wrong in your business, right? What are the risks of your business? Let's say that you are creating a digital product. You have an online course, and so you're an online course company. The amount of things that could go wrong are large, but they're not necessarily significant, right? Maybe your servers go down and people can't access the course, and so they get mad at you because they can't take the course that they paid for, and then it goes back up a week later. Maybe your course has incorrect information in it, for example, and you have to go ahead and correct the information that somebody relied on it, and suddenly they made that decision based on this information. So you can see that some things can happen in this type of business that are problematic, but not of the kind that could potentially be catastrophic. Compare this then to, let's say you are starting a medical device company. If your device somehow malfunctions, right, it could lead to something catastrophic in terms of someone's health. Let's say that you run a physical storefront, right? Someone can slip and fall at that storefront. Someone could hit their head on a countertop, right? These are the types of things that can go wrong. These are much more catastrophic because they represent something that might entail bodily injury or large fees should it go wrong, or some sort of risky operation. For example, we work with someone who creates security robots, right? These are robots that basically patrol places looking for intruders. You can imagine how many things that could go wrong. For example, not only if the security bot is overbroad in who it decides that it's a security threat, but also if it's under-inclusive of who it decides is a security threat and lets some security threat through. All in all, right, you should weigh the probability that things can go wrong over the amount it costs to form this business. Because if it costs $3,000 to form the business, but you believe that if something bad happens, you could have tens of thousands of dollars worth of risk, and it's likely that that thing can happen, right? Then you can see how the calculus starts moving towards forming the LLC to get that personal liability shield. All right, your willingness to take on upfront costs versus the value that you get. And so there's a lot of value, again, that you get from forming the LLC. For example, let's say that you're trying to get outside investment, right? That brings you a lot of value to start the formation process now. Because let's say that you have in 2 weeks, you're about to start a presentation to get someone to invest, let's say $30,000 in your company. And so clearly it's not like a venture capitalist or anything like that, but it's a significant amount from someone who might not necessarily be a direct friend or family member. And so to the extent that that person is going to ask you whether or not you're going to form organization, you want to be able to say yes by the time you have the meeting. And if you're only deciding the day before that meeting that you're going to start engaging with that process, you're already too late. And so I think that one of the things that you should do is determine, do you need money to create your minimum viable product, so your MVP, or do you need money to shore up the level of professionalism with your operation? And so sometimes you're going to lean towards, let's keep trying to generate revenue, and other times when you are generating revenue but you are taking on more risks, it might flip. And so these are the 3 things that I would say that everyone should internally look at in your own business and decide, how important is this? And these things change, right? Because you might inherit money, or you might start making a product that has a higher level of risk, or you might be put into a situation where suddenly you have too many general partners that you're working with, and you want to create a system where everyone is more organized. We can talk more about this a little bit more in another section that we talk about. All right, when should I form my company? So now I talked a little bit about how you should think about the priority of forming a company, but what part of the process, right? One thing to keep in mind is that some huge percentage of companies don't really last long. They don't last long enough to create a product and bring it to market. So again, if everyone just decided to immediately form a corporation just because a lawyer told them that it might be a good idea, you can imagine there's a lot of potential money and time wasted at that point. And so when should you decide to form your company? Well, here's a timeline of the types of things that the types of situations that you are in as you're moving towards the launch of the product, where you might start thinking about forming an LLC. All right, so let's say, I think I used this example last time I spoke about this. Let's say that you think that you have a great idea. So the great idea is, I want socks. I want to make these socks, but they have ice packs in them. Put them in the freezer. And so I want people to be wearing socks that are ice cold. I think that people really, really want this. And so no one's done this before, and this is your time to shine. Okay, well, great idea, question mark. You're at the product idea stage. And so now, should you form the LLC? Well, unclear. Maybe you're not necessarily going to get enough value, right? Oh, I'm making socks, right? What are the big problems I have right now just with the idea of making these socks, right? And maybe I don't have that much to lose right now. And so maybe I'll determine the viability of the product by creating my first set of socks. And so instead of manufacturing them, right, I might just buy 2 ice packs from CVS and some thick socks and then put them in the freezer and then have people try them on. But then everybody's like, these are terrible. Why would I ever want to wear these? This is a stupid idea. And so suddenly you realize, yes, this is a dumb idea. And so because you decided to determine the viability of the product before you formed your LLC, you get 2 things. Number one, you didn't spend the $800 to $3,000 it might cost to form the LLC, but you also don't have to pay for the costs of potentially winding up the LLC. Because one thing that is important to understand when you start an LLC or a corporation is that if it doesn't work out, you can't simply abandon it, right? You can't just ignore it as if it never happened. You have to pay more money and fill out more forms to make sure that it actually gets wound up in the way that the California government wants it to be wound up. And so that, again, is extra time that you could be using to form another product idea. This is much better. So now you have socks that heat up your feet instead of socks that make your feet cold. You did a bunch of surveys and decided that people want warm feet when they put on socks. Great idea. Okay, so product is clearly viable. You bring on internal partners, right? So you all are starting to become familiar with this process of it's hard to do everything on your own because you're not necessarily an expert. And so let's say that your area of expertise is sort of the fashion and the design element. And so maybe you've worked in retail for a very long time and you know what kind of socks sell. And you also are a hobbyist graphic designer, so you're able to make the designs of the socks. And so for all these reasons, this is the thing that you bring to the business. And this is how you think you're going to make your ideas sort of pop. But you don't necessarily know much about manufacturing. You may not know about distribution to retail, and so you might have to bring on someone else. And so at the point where you bring on other people who might have different levels of expertise or different levels of time and energy they could put into the project, or even money that they might be putting into the project. Anytime that you bring on these types of people, suddenly you increase the risk because you don't just have to worry about external things that could go wrong. You also should be worrying about internal things that go wrong. Many times, I actually see more businesses that are in the startup phase implode because of issues with the people working together, not necessarily issues with the business model fundamentally. And so what I mean by that, to give concrete examples, are disagreements on how much work either person is putting into it, disagreements about when someone should be paid back as to when they put in money, etc. And so anytime you're dealing with people's finances, people's valuable time, and also ownership and control of the business, you run into situations where you add in a higher level of risk. All right, maybe we don't have an LLC yet, maybe we do. What happens though when we bring on external partners? All right, so we have our dream team of 4 different people. I design the stocks and I know how to sell them. Someone else manufactures them in the factory. Someone else is the person who does all the marketing, and someone else is the person who is kind of like an executive assistant type. These are all the founding partners. Well, now we need someone to actually sell these stocks. So we might decide that we're going to enter into a distribution deal with, let's say, Big Lots, or I don't know, maybe a larger boutique, right? And so we have to then manufacture 3,000 pairs of socks for these boutiques and send them across the country. Well, suddenly you can see that the calculus changes again, because if you're entering into this deal, it seems like it would be relatively important for your partner to have more faith in your operation, right? If you were a formal company with its own bank accounts and its own administrative and governance structures, right? People are less likely to do deals with sole proprietorships and general partnerships because they don't necessarily have their own external governance measures, right? So that might have been a time where, in anticipation of this deal, you might have started to form. The amount of things that can go wrong skyrockets, right? Because what if you don't make the socks on time? What if during the manufacture of the socks, someone gets hurt at the factory and they don't want to make your socks anymore? Are you responsible for that? How valuable are your personal assets? Well, at this point, you may have already sold some socks, right? Or maybe you had a change in life, right? You had a child, or you bought a house, etc. And so you can see that as things progress, you're starting to realize that the LLC or the corporation is much more important. And I can go on, but I'd like to leave a little bit more time for the other topics. So let's see. Let's skip this for now. All right, second topic, contracts with external partners. So by this, I'm talking about vendors or people who are developing something for you, like a website or an app. And so one thing that I think is important to, by the way, I'm going to use just an app or website development agreement as the context for this, just to have something concrete to talk about. But one thing I would say, and this is a general recommendation for everyone, because everyone's sort of using the internet, and there's going to be different levels of technical proficiency as to some people are digital natives and they can build their own website. Some people might have less technical expertise and might hire someone. One thing that I would say is that, Tanya would, I imagine, second this, to the extent that you can internally create your own materials to begin with. I think it's really important to be able to control that, because whenever you're working with any external partner, particularly one with technical expertise, you're much more likely to have issues for all sorts of reasons that I'll get into. So if you can make your thing, or if you can bring someone in to make your thing, the better you are. All right. So let's say that you're trying to hire someone to make an app or a website for you. But again, apply this to anything related to your business where you have to bring in outside expertise. Here are some of the most important contractual things you're thinking about when you are putting together this arrangement with the other side. And so another very, very important thing to understand, when I say contracts, everyone thinks about like, oh, you typed this, you had a lawyer formally type this up and you signed it with a feather quill or whatever. And so that can be a contract, yes, but a contract does not need to be that formal. A contract at its very basic level is an agreement where I ask you to do something and you agree to do this and we trade our promises. And so it need not be put together by a lawyer, but it just needs to be thought out very well because it defines the relationship between yourself and the other side in a concrete way. And so all of these things are things that you don't have to be a professional to think about. And so let me tell you about why I pulled these out as the types of things that I think are really important to think about when you're thinking about working with anyone external. Okay, first, deliverables. You wouldn't have a deal with someone if you weren't asking them to do something for you, right? And so being very clear about what is being delivered is important. And so you might say, Shaun, of course I know that I'm going to ask for what I want. Why would I not? That seems so straightforward, but it's actually not. Coming up with the deliverables is really hard for one reason. You are bringing on this person because you don't know how to do it yourself. If you don't know how to do it yourself, then you don't actually know what goes into it. Because if you did know what goes in every single thing that goes into in detail, you would have probably done it yourself. And as a result, oftentimes you find, at least for me, when I review agreements that people have put together themselves, you end up seeing issues with someone asking for something that either didn't actually show up in the final product, or conversely, they asked for something that was so unclear that millions of things showed up in the final product and created huge problems because it created a lot of cost overruns. One thing that is also important to think about when thinking about deliverables is that I don't know if this rule has a name, but I teach law students about how to draft these types of contracts. And one thing I tell them is that the only thing that is sure about any contract with an external partner to deliver something complex is that it will always cost more money and take more time than everyone thinks that it will take. Not that you can predict where it will cost more money or how much more time that it will take, simply that you always know that it will. And this is because when you start asking someone to do something for you, particularly complex project, you have no idea what they're actually capable of doing, and also what will work and what will not work, right? When you're coming up with deliverables, you have to realize that you're making educated guesses. And so 30% of the way into what's being delivered, you realize that you actually have to change course. And so if you don't anticipate the fact that you will inevitably have to change course, you're likely going to overpay, or at least overpay in an unexpected way, or have something take longer than it's supposed to take. And so again, this is one of the things that the terms it's used when you're thinking about how much things overrun in complex projects is called scope creep. So SCOPE, And so it's the idea that the scope of the project sort of creeps slightly outward as things go on. So that's one of the things that you should also be aware about in deliverables. How can you fix this? How can you, without an attorney, figure out how to make sure that anytime you're working with outsiders, you always try to ask for the best deliverables that you can, and the most specific deliverables that you can? Well, you learn more about the thing that you're buying, right? A website is something technical, but it's something that you should learn a little bit more about how it works. What is it the person you're doing is like? Imagine for a second you're watching the person that you're hiring in a security camera. Can you actually describe what it is that they're doing, right? Like, you're looking over your shoulder. How does the thing work? Because if you don't have any idea as to how the thing that you're actually asking for works, then you don't know enough to know what to specifically ask for them to do. Yes, an app developer codes an app, but what does that mean, right? You need to figure out, well, how long does that usually take? And because, again, I think an important thing about scope creep is that it's often the fault of the buyer that the scope creep happens, right? Again, don't think about this just as an app or anything. Think about this as any external partner, right? Someone who's manufacturing something for you. It's because if you ask for, let's say you're asking a graphic design firm to change up something that you don't like. right? And so this is a technical design, so it involves both coding and aesthetics. You think, oh, how about you change that to red and make it twice as big? And so you think it's a sort of insignificant change. However, when the technical people actually decide that they're going to make it twice as large and change the color, that's actually a meaningful change that might take a day or two, right? Again, if you figure out how this stuff actually works, you will have a stronger appreciation of what questions to ask and what to not ask for or ask for during the process of delivery. All right, so next, timing. I mean, I could talk about deliverables again for probably the entire time we're talking here, but let's move on to something else, timing. And so be specific about when you want what it is that's being delivered. Again, it seems completely obvious, but again, one of the things that you should figure out is that scope creep happens and it will always happen. And so your timing is always going to be off. If you're relying on an external partner to give something at X date because you have another thing that needs to be delivered at Y date, you should change the dates of both, knowing that X date will not happen, right? It will not be delivered on time. So you have more of a cushion on Y date, right? These are the things that when a lawyer is looking at two contracts and they say these things are going to conflict, this would be something they point out. And so it's something that you can point out for yourself within what you are working with outsiders. All right, minimum standards. This is a non-obvious thing. If I'm buying something that I don't know what it is and I don't know when they're going to give it to me, I don't necessarily know exactly what I want at the beginning. And so most people decide, since they don't know exactly what they want, they'll just wait and see. But contracts are here to predict problems and minimize risk. And so what you want to do, rather than simply waiting and seeing as to what you actually want, is that you should initially develop minimum standards for what you don't want. Because it's actually very easy to figure out what you don't want in a relationship with someone, even if you can't figure out what you do want. And so, for example, let's say that you're building an app, right? Someone without minimum standards might just say, build the app and I hope it works, right? And if it doesn't work, then we'll figure out what the penalty is. But if you added minimum standards into your relationship, you could say, I will not pay for the app unless it functions fully on both Apple devices, so iOS, and Android devices, right? That is now a firm minimum standard that reins in the ability for there to be an argument about what it is that you actually ask to deliver. And so I think that despite the fact that it's very difficult to anticipate things in areas that you're unfamiliar with, you can always come up with minimum standards. Again, let's think about a factory, right? Manufacturing. You're making these socks that heat up, right? You can imagine a minimum standard that says these socks won't hurt anyone when they heat up because they won't go over X temperature, right? If they do go over X temperature, we don't have to pay for them, or you have to make them again, right? Oh, these socks should be a certain thread count, right? Because if you use fabric that's lower than that, then they won't be the type of quality that we want, and we can't sell them. And so again, minimum standards. We're not telling you what thread count it should be because I have no idea. I don't make socks for a living. I don't run a factory, but we're saying that these are the minimums that we should have. All right, technical support. This is something, again, not necessarily obvious, and this is one of the reasons why I use app developers as a good example of an external agreement. And so buying a website is not necessarily like buying a, I don't know, let me think of something used for work, buying a computer, right? Because a website, you don't know when it ends. It has no completion point, right? A computer, if it turns on, it boots up and it's all your programs, it works, right? A website is in constant flux. And so imagine for a second that, I mean, a lot of people in contracts that I might see have, I will pay you when the website is done. Well, what does it mean when the website is done? when it's fully functional. Because think about it, if a website is fully functional, right, and then 100 users get to it, your first 100 users, and then one of those users has a major complaint about how the website works. It does not work for them. It doesn't show up right? They can't download it. They can't actually buy the thing that you're selling on the site, and so you have to fix that bug. And so you fix that bug, but then, and now 300 people go to your website. And then 5 of them have complaints because they all use different browsers, or they use tablets, or they don't have keyboards, or they have accessibility issues. And so you have 5 more things that go wrong. When is the website done? When is the app completed? And so you have to realize that there are going to be things that you, and this goes to updates and service levels, they're going to be things that you cannot fix on the website, but you must still have a relationship with this outside party to continue to give you. And if you don't have a relationship, a continuing relationship with them, then the project has to be abandoned, or you have to bring it to someone else. And so here's a problem with bringing it to someone else. Code and lots of other things aren't necessarily standardized. And so if the developer that you're working with drops out, you would then have to bring it to another developer. That developer would charge you a lot of money simply to understand the thing that you're giving to them, even before they have the ability to update it. Because again, it's not like these things can be transferred. Once you start working with an external partner, it's very difficult to stop working with that partner because they have too much internal information about how the thing works for it to be financially reasonable to pick this up. To move your process to someone else. Again, you can think about this not in the internet context, you think about this in the manufacturing context. The manufacturer has all of the CAD designs, or they have all of the proofs, right? They have all of the samples. And so trying to move to another manufacturer is going to be incredibly difficult because you have to get all that stuff from them if they want to give it to you. All right, technical support. Moving back to that, you have all these problems that people are complaining about. However, the fact is that if you don't understand how to make the website or make the app, you don't necessarily know how to answer all the questions about how it works to allow people to be able to use it. As a result, you need to keep your external partners on for longer than you might think to actually do the support for the people who are using it. Because again, you don't know how the website works, or you would have made it yourself. You don't know how the app works, you may have used made it yourself. And so why do I bring up these 2 things, technical support and continuing service levels? Because these are 2 case in points where people may not realize how long they're going to be committed to working with their external partners. And let me give you a concrete example. You all are currently in various stages of school, right? You might also be working with technical people who are in college, right? Or starting early careers. And so to the extent that they currently have time and energy to work on entrepreneurial projects, great. But everyone graduates and wants to get a high-paying job, right? They don't necessarily want to continue working for a startup necessarily. And so you are now competing with all those people who need jobs. And so to the extent that the person who was developing your thing it leaves for some other greener pasture, then you have to worry about all these things because suddenly your technical support and your updates are gone. And so one might have a arrangement with this person that says, regardless of whether or not you take another job, you continue to owe X amount of hours in technical support and updates, right? This is how you fix this problem ahead of time. And as you can see, it doesn't require an attorney to figure out that this is a problem. And also doesn't necessarily require an attorney to develop a solution for this ahead of time and put that solution on paper, right? Ownership of work created. I don't have very much time to talk about this one, but I will say that anytime you're working with external partners, it is very, very likely that they will own, for example, the intellectual property that they create. And so let's say I ask somebody to write a screenplay for me, and I give them the idea, I pay them $1,000 to write the screenplay. They come back in 3 weeks, they hand me 120 pages, and they're like, here's the movie that you asked me to write. What I own is not the movie. What I own is not the screenplay and the right to make the movie from the screenplay. What I own is 120 pieces of paper. What the other person still owns, despite the fact that I paid them lots of money, is the screenplay. And so I need a actual writing that transfers that intellectual property to me. And so one of the ways that you can remember this is that the law doesn't really want people to be able to transfer their intellectual property easy, because they don't necessarily they might not know that they're transferring it when they just give over a piece of paper. And so they want people who are transferring their creativity to do it expressly. So this is why the law generally requires a writing, because they want people to know exactly what it is that they're giving away and sign it away. And as a result, anytime you're working with an external partner who is making anything creative for you, be it a graphic designer, an app developer, someone who's doing code, someone who's manufacturing your product, right? These are all things that you're going to want a written agreement that expressly transfers the intellectual property to you. All right. So the tail end of this is, what do lawyers do? So no slides here. I think that this is going to be a little bit free form, but I might talk about when you might need a lawyer, when you think you might need to pay a lawyer, but you actually don't, when you should pay a lawyer, even though you don't think you actually need to. So situations where I've seen in the past that those things might happen. To give you a little bit more context before I answer those questions, there are a lot of different areas of law that lawyers work in, right? So there are corporate lawyers, commercial lawyers, securities lawyers, intellectual property lawyers. So the things that I've talked about right now overlap quite a bit with corporate law. So the first thing I was talking about, business formation. So corporate lawyers are people who form and help administrate corporations, right? You might also see this advertised as business lawyer. So a lot of local small firms might say, I'm a business lawyer. We are business lawyers. And so these are the types of people that you might go to form a business. They might also work in intellectual property like I do, and talk about things like who owns copyrights, right? And so for a startup, you might want to find someone with business and contract and intellectual property experience, because those tend to be the types of areas that are most useful for startups at the beginning. So these people will also likely be the types of people who may draft commercial contracts, so the types of things with external partners. And during the process of business formation or advising on your general partnership, they might also be the people who make a partnership agreement with you. So if you don't have an LLC yet, you don't have a corporation yet, but you do want a more firm sort of relationship with your internal partners, a general partnership agreement would be useful, and a business lawyer would be the type of person who might do this. All right, so answering your questions, when you might need a lawyer. And so I think that if we go through some of these things that we could have talked about, terms of service and privacy policy. And so people constantly come to us, do I need one or do I not need one? And so the answer is generally, if you are a service that has a lot of interactivity on your website, right, you might want to have a terms of service and privacy policy. But isn't this the type of thing? I mean, again, these terms of service is a contract. Let's compare this to the contract that I just talked about, which are contracts with the external parties, right? If you are trying to prioritize with an attorney, should I have contracts with my external parties put together in stone, or should I have a terms of service together in stone by a lawyer? I would definitely say that the priority would be a contract with an external partner because there is more risk, there are more variables. Terms of service, you could use, for example, an online program that generates your terms of service for you. Would it be as good as something generated specifically for your website by a human? Probably not. But if you're thinking about the risk reward for what I should spend my money on, it's clearly this thing that can create much more hassle or that can create much more opportunity should you be able to do it right. And so one takeaway here, if we're talking about what do lawyers do, it helps, a lawyer might help you prioritize what is actually useful for you to spend your limited amount of money on and what is actually useful for you to spend your limited amount of time on, and forget about certain things that aren't. When should you pay a lawyer even though you don't need one? So there are types of people who are very risk averse, right? And you might end up overpaying or over sort of being over anxious as to when you need a lawyer. And there are other people who think lawyers don't do anything. Why would I need a lawyer? And so I think the most important part of this is also thinking about, let's say, privacy policy, right? Let's use the exact same example of the terms of service and a privacy policy. So privacy policy is required by law whenever you have a interactive website that collects information. You don't even need a website, right? Some apps and things like that. As long as it collects personal information, you might need a privacy policy. And so to the extent that you don't have one because you haven't gotten a lawyer to make one, you haven't made one yourself, it may not be an issue, right? It may not be one of those things that a regulator is going to come after you and fine you, because regulators have much more important things to do than sue random startups or fine random startups for not having privacy policy. However, not having a privacy policy or having a privacy policy that misstates certain things actually sets you up in a really bad position should, for example, your startup be purchased later on, right? Because maybe since you didn't ask for permission to get certain things at the earliest stage of your startup, the value of your startup is actually much lower because one of the most valuable things about the company is the data that the company has about its users, the data that it collects through marketing, the data that it collects through people's use of the app. And so this is why Facebook, Google, Amazon are such valued companies, because they have so much data. And so to the extent that you never got permission to use, sell, capture, etc., any of this data, and then you want to turn around and exit by selling your company, suddenly you don't own all of this valuable stuff, and you didn't necessarily realize that it was because you never considered what should be in your privacy policy ahead of time, because you assumed that all you needed to do was copy and paste the privacy policy from somewhere else. And so you can see that one of those things, if I were to sort of give you another takeaway as we're wrapping up, of when should you pay a lawyer even though you don't need one, it's very, very hard to know what you don't know. And so it's useful to get an outside perspective of what your business is doing and then decide based on additional information from an expert outsider what is actually a priority for you and what might not necessarily be a problem now, because clearly isn't a problem, but someone who's seen the whole life cycle of the business and realizes that yes, it's not a problem now, but it will be a problem in 2 years. And unfortunately, you can't fix the problem later on. And so that's something very, very hard to know unless you've been through the whole process or you've seen many people go through the whole process. Tanya, so I don't know how we're doing on time. It's 6.
I think we're over. We're actually a little over on time.
Yeah.
Yeah, but I definitely want to make sure to I'll give everybody a way to connect with you. And if you want to leave everybody with a thought of where they should go from here, what's the most important?
Oh yeah, again, I think that the most important thing to know is we are at newmediarights.org. You can go to the website, you can contact us there. If you do have a legal question, it would be good to go through the form. If you have just a question, a personal question for me, you can reach me at this email address. And again, I encourage you, it's always good to try to know the things you don't know. So I encourage you to get our newsletter, to sign up to one or various of our social media accounts. You can see that at the top bar at newmediarights.org. And we have updates about the types of things that startups like you are doing and other speaking events that we're doing. So yeah, I think that just
We'll share all this too with them, with the students, especially out of the rec, and then including the links so they can book some time if they need to. And yeah, I think that's pretty good, right? I feel like we got everything. Oh, one last thing. I would encourage all of you, if you wouldn't mind, there's a survey link in the chat that Angela has posted. If you could just go in there and we'll post it one more time, and we'd love to get the feedback from all of you. Let us know what you think and let us know what you'd like to see for next time.
all right, great. And I guess there's no time for questions, but I wish there was.
We'll end the recording here. We'll stick around in case anybody has any questions.
Yeah, sure. I'll stick around.
You have a couple
No worries.
minutes? Perfect.
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah, of course.
I'll say goodbye to those of you who have to leave and then stop the recording. And those who want to stick around,